Hello, my name is Darrell, and I am a Jehovah's Witness in good standing. Or if we prefer, I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses in good standing. Either is grammatically correct. Some choose one, the others choose the other. This video is not approved by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York or the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Pennsylvania. It's not approved by the 9 faithful, loving, compassionate, loving kindness that these 9 individuals show there at Warwick, New York. They're labeled the governing body or the faithful and discreet slaves, Matthew 24:45. And it's not approved by any local body of elders. I made this video, and all 8.6 million Jehovah's Witnesses work for Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is our leader. Matthew 23:10, call one man your leader, Jesus Christ. Call one your leader, Jesus Christ. He's not a man anymore. He's up in heaven. But anyways, this is going to be a recap on my legal elements as they unfolded here now. I'm not going to get into a lot of details. And if you haven't followed along, you might not be able to get the gist of it, but be assured that I'll cover it all eventually. It'll all be covered. There's a couple of cases I have pending in the court yet. I was persecuted by a guy I worked for because of my religion, and it spawned out, and it got so confusing to these idiot bureaucrats that it's alarming to see that this actually happens, but it does. So without further ado, let's get into this. Now, on November 24, 2016, I was hired as a caretaker by Richard Castellane, who was a talentless millionaire. He had already squandered millions of dollars on one movie and some books that he produced, and he was just about to enter into another movie. He never made a dime on any of these projects. He hired me as a caretaker for his 83-acre estate, which was mediocre at best. This was run down. It was just dilapidated. Even the equipment was dilapidated. But he hired me as his caretaker, and I told him I would make minor repairs if he would let us live on the property. And he had a basement dwelling, which was in pretty bad shape, but it worked well for Maria and I because we wanted to serve Jehovah full time. So this was our small Social Security checks would get us through everything. So he furnished the electric, the basement apartment, 3 rooms, bedroom, living room, and a kitchen, electric, heating, plumbing, internet, cable TV. Now, for my services, of course, I could live rent and utility free, and this went on for a few years. Everything was great until 2019, when Castellane had this knee replacement and wouldn't do the doctor-ordered regimen. He just wouldn't exercise. He wouldn't do nothing with it. He just sat in his chair because it hurt. Of course, it hurts. It's a surgery. But he got real lazy, and Maria felt sorry for him, so she started preparing his meals in the morning, his 3 meals in the morning, so he could just go there and put them on the stove and cook them up and be done. And she was doing a little bit of his laundry, well, all of his laundry, and she would wash the dishes every day. But as we all know, and we've learned through life, at least the older ones, once you volunteer more work for cheapskates, they tend to demand it now, and they make it sound as though you had agreed to that service when you became an employee. And that was not the case. I was the one hired, not Maria. I was the caretaker, not the caregiver. But I felt sorry for the old talentless scoundrel and allowed Maria to serve him. That is until December of 2022. Castellane and I got in a tiff over an idiot named Robert Altman. Now, Altman was Castellane's yes man who didn't bring a single penny to the Castellane Productions, LLC, for the duration of his 3 or 4 years of employment. It was sad to watch from the sideline. In January 2022, I decided enough was enough, so Maria went to visit her family. Maria's from Brazil, and we were able to save up for Maria to go to Brazil because we didn't pay rent and utilities. So that was part of the reason for my taking this job in this dilapidated log cabin. But anyways, I wrote Castellane an email telling him that Maria, my wife, would no longer be assisting him when she got back. That meant he had to hire a housekeeper. Now, the reason Castellane and I got into this tiff was over Robert Altman, another talentless individual that I had told Altman eventually that he was overpaid. Castellane hired some visiting nurse company. After repeatedly pleading with me, he hired some nurse, that supplies nurses 24 hours a day or whatever. But the driveway to the Castellane house was extremely difficult to traverse and to maneuver your car around. And any vehicle that didn't have all-wheel drive would be very difficult for them. They'd have to take running starts at these little type of hills that he had. So it was about 1/3 of a mile long, and there was on one side it would drop off about 20 feet on certain spots, 20 or 30 feet, not straight down, but kind of a slant down. One day, one of the nurses couldn't get up the last slope of the driveway. She didn't have all-wheel drive, so she threatened not to return unless something was done. Well, Altman texted me, Robert Altman, and this is his business associate. It's not, his employee, and he's not over me, not my boss. But Robert Altman texted me and suggested that the driveway be dusted with sand. I replied, sure, sounds good to me. He then told me to call someone and he would provide payment. But he didn't provide the card number to me or a check to me, signed check to me. No, you see, so I laughed at him. If he had been serious, he would have provided me the card number so that people would be paid. He didn't even give me a phone number to contact him, nothing. That's how stupid this guy is. So I reminded Altman that I am not a secretary and that Castellane has a secretary to make those kinds of calls. Altman replied to me in text, "It's your job." I laughed again. That's when I told him he was overpaid. So I went to Castellane and I showed him the text message between me and Altman. I told Altman that I was to plow the road, cut the weeds, and that's it. And you see, this idiot Altman, he knew that Castellane demands to be in on everything. In other words, I didn't have a budget. No, you see, Castellane was the yes man. You had to go and tell him yes, what do you need, and hope that he says, okay, do it, and here's the money. Well, I told Castellane Altman was conning him out of his money and was not productive. Castellane called me a name, by the way, in the text messages. I forget what it was. And Castellane became irate. And this is the moment that I thought that it was possibly these guys were homosexual lovers. But anyways, Castellane and I argued over Altman, the paid yes man. After that, we would avoid each other as much as possible. Well, along late January, there was a flood, an intentional flood caused by Castellane. But we'll get into that in a minute. If there were anything other than minor repairs to the place, Castellane would always hire outside help, cheap help. Keep in mind, he never offered Maria a dime, and for 7 days a week, for like 2 or 3 years, she would wash his dishes, do his laundry, and prepare food for him. Yeah, that's right. He often told me how valuable Maria was and how no matter what happened, he would provide for us after his death. I used to have to bite my lip from laughing out loud and calling him a liar to his very face. I knew he wasn't going to do that. That's not the kind of guy he was. But I didn't expect anything other than a place to live for my services. I was the employee, and he wasn't getting Maria for the same price. Now, he was a punk, a liar, a cheapskate, all rolled into one. That's Richard Castellane. and I could see right through that facade. Now, during the last few days of January and the first few days of February, the old geezer tried to evict us, get rid of us by flooding out our apartment with septic tank water. I have videos of it. He hired a couple of idiots named Norman and Diane Button, and then on the coldest day of January 2022, he had them run all the taps in the house to flood the septic tank into the basement apartment. He knew this because it happened 5 years before that. Before I got there, it happened. So I took video of the septic tank water coming into the shower and how the tiles were coming up from the water damage. He obviously knew the tank would flood because it happened before. Like I said, 5 years, a little more than that, before I got there. Now the floor tiles were coming up because, you get water underneath them and stuff, and we're talking sewage water. I didn't realize how bad it would get, or it was. It actually was because of the mold. I reported the flooding to Cass Lane, and he sent that idiot Norman down to look at it. Norman Button. Button then blamed me and claimed I wasn't doing my job. Not Button, but Altman. I mean, not Altman. Well, Altman too, but Cass Lane. So he wouldn't do anything about the septic tank. It sat for 3-4 days. I think over a week had gone by, and it rescinded, But then he called the plumber, and that idiot couldn't even find the location of the septic tank. And the flood had rescinded by that time, so it was too late. In February, I received 2 emails from Cass Lane where he provides that as a Jehovah's Witness, I had no permission to practice my religion at his home. Yet he knew I was a Jehovah's Witness when he hired me. That's why we told him we were taking his job. On March 4, 2022, I received an offer of $1,500 cash to vacate the property from some hotshot law firm. On March 7, 2022, I rejected the offer because I had a verbal lease, which is binding in New York. On March 8, 2022, we received the diagnosis from the doctor that Maria was diagnosed with COPD, likely from black mold. On March 11, 2022, Cass Lane and Company disconnected my internet by changing the router password. And then Cass Lane faked a fall around 12 o'clock or so, midnight. And, of course, we lived in this basement apartment. Now, if there were any thumps on the floor of a 200-pound man falling, we would have heard it. There was none, so he didn't fall. Well, the paramedics came and carted him off to the hospital around 1 a.m. And when I tried to go online, to get on the internet wasn't working. So I went upstairs and tried to reset the internet. Now I noticed what appeared to be a few cameras installed, so I took one down, opened it up, because cheapskate Cass Lane had previously asked me to install fake cameras. So I was able to talk him out of it at that time. But when I discovered the camera was real, I reinstalled it. So I tried to reset the internet several times and couldn't get it to work on my end. The cable in the internet went right through Cass Lane's abode and then to mine. Of course, the cameras picked me up in the video doing this. And on March 12, 2023, around 10 a.m., a cop knocks on my door. His name is Ethan C. Coase. He asked me a bunch of questions, and I answered him. I told him I was the caretaker, and the internet was part of my pay for that exercise. And that I went up to restart the internet. And so he asked me about the camera, and I explained, why I was messing with the camera, and I explained why I took the camera down. Then he left. Now, before he left, he toured the apartment upstairs of Cass Lane. This was a 5-apartment dwelling, but there were only 4 apartments that were lived in. The other apartment he used for storage. Now, as he walked out to the porch of the upstairs there, up above me, in Cass Lane's place, he noticed a ramp. It was leaning against a tree. Now, the ramp was on this, instead of the stairs, so Cass Lane was supposedly could get out. Cass Lane hadn't used that ramp in 3 years. In fact, all the time I was there, he hardly ever came down that ramp before he had his knee operation. After his knee operation in 2019, he never went down that ramp. Now, Cash Lane returned home, and the cop interviewed him. But Norman and that loudmouth Diane Button did most of the talking. The cop kept telling Cash Lane, I need you to tell me that Darryl could not come up. I need you to tell me that you told Darryl that he could not come up here into your apartment. 3 different times he says this. Cash Lane finally avoided the direct question, and he says, oh, Darryl knew. The lawyers told him, which was a load of crap. The lawyers never told me anything. Now, the cop solicited a lie from Cash Lane. He has to go out to get it right. He has to go out 3 or 4 times to his car to type on his little computer out there in the car. Because the lawyers didn't tell me anything except that Cash Lane wanted to amicably end the lease, and they offered me $1,500. But I explained that that's not how the law works with a verbal lease. You can't just part company. You got to have reasons for that. You got to give me notice and all that. Anyways, the cop then came down to my apartment after he interviewed Cash Lane, and he said he was placing me under arrest for criminal trespass. I tried to reason with this clown. Now, this guy is a total moron, okay? I tried to reason with him that I was the caretaker, and I had the keys. Actually, it was one key for the whole building, at least our part. And there was one other apartment where this chick lived, and that was a different apartment. But his apartment, my apartment, the other 3 apartments. Well, the one apartment was above him, so you had to go upstairs to get to him. But they all operated on the same key, except for the one apartment where the girl lived. Now, I tried to explain to Bozo the clown there that Cash Lane gave me the keys. So what does he do? He tells me a barefaced lie. He said Cash Lane told him he never gave me any keys. And the next day, this moron is calling me for the keys. He wants the keys. I also pointed, as he's arrested me, I pointed to the dog. I says, that's Cash Lane's dog. I'm taking care of his dog who has arthritis and can't make it up the ramp or the stairs. And he just shrugs it off. This guy was a moron. The ramp was too steep even for Cash Lane to use it, so the dog couldn't get up the ramp and he couldn't climb the stairs. I had to carry the dog, and it was a black lab, so you can imagine how big the dog is. I can't carry him anymore. And like I said, the next day the cop calls me wanting the keys. Now, this idiot moron, Ethan C. Coase, took me down to the station where they fingerprinted me and took a mugshot, and then they took me back home. Now, he could have just issued me a ticket, but no, he had to parade me in front of Cash Lane's cameras to impress the millionaire. So he cuffed me, walked me by the camera, and then booked me and brought me back. Now, March 13th, 2022, that clown called me. That's the day after this now. And he asked for the keys that Cash Lane never gave. I figured this was an open and shut case, so I didn't even get an attorney. When I went to court in April of 2023, there was another clown posing as a judge named Daniel Vinyl. And then there was a prosecutor, John S. Rogers, assistant state's attorney. And these 2 clowns make a real scare pair. They should have dismissed this case. It was civil in matter. At least 2 sheriff's deputies had previously told me it was a civil matter. So this clown judge issues an order of protection. Now, an order of protection is generally given to a female when she's abuse in the family, she's been abused, children. That's when you order, when judges order. This clown orders a protection order against me sending Cash Lane emails. And that's a violation of my constitutional rights. I can send emails to whoever I want. This clown judge thought he had more power than the Constitution. But anyways, the order said I could not send Cash Lane any emails or generally mess with Cash Lane in any way, shape, or form. So on or about March 15th, 2022, I filed a complaint against Castleton with the county sheriff's office about the flooding and the ramp, the plywood ramp he placed in front of my apartment, so I couldn't get in, or somebody would get hurt if they tried to step over it and slipped. And one deputy named Smith and a sergeant named Jones, and I know those names sound weird, but Christopher Smith and something Jones, told me that the case was a civil matter. Yet the law said that if the landlord blocks the way to your apartment for any reason, he commits a crime. And that sergeant backed him up. So it was a civil case. Now, on April 28, 2022, Castleton and Company reinstalled the ramp that blocked my apartment, knowing I would remove it. Now, keep in mind, now Castleton cannot use that ramp under any circumstances. There's no possible way, impossible for him to use that ramp. And the camera, of course, they had pointing, the camera that was outside, they had pointing right down towards the ramp. So I removed it. And I made a video showing how high it was. It was like 9 inches high, you know. So if you walk, you know, you had to walk right across it to get to my apartment. So on June 9th, you know, after they arrested me for that on May 12th, I appeared on June 9th at a hearing on the charge of trespass and the additional charge of violating a court order. Now the judge wouldn't even let me defend my action. This clown, this moron, this guy was a total moron. He never had he even admitted to me that he never had a lick of training in the law, and yet here he is sitting over criminal cases, albeit minor cases. So he wouldn't let me defend about removing the plywood booby trap. He says, no, you had a chance. I'm issuing a stay-away order. So I was in jail for 5 hours on May 5th, or May 12th. I was in jail for 5 hours when they finally came to my house. 3 officers. It took 3 officers to arrest this 71-year-old man. So here I am, June 9th, in court. I'm begging this judge not to do this, and the state's attorney. And then that clown assistant state's attorney, John S. Rogers, admitted that he was pursuing this case because I berated him on my YouTube channel and called him a punk. Now, this case should have been dismissed, folks. It should have been immediately dismissed. In fact, the cop should have never filed the charges. But he's a moron. It was a slow crime day. Now, they didn't even realize that I knew a lot about the law. And then it dawned on them that I was going to go to trial. Now, unfortunately, I recorded the June 9th, 2022 hearing before the clown judge. Now, after I found out that you can't do that, I didn't record anymore. But I have that recording. And there was no posted anywhere, and I didn't know that, you know, it was not against the law. It was a contempt charge. My final attorney that they appointed me, this bozo the clown, told me that if I filmed in court, it was a misdemeanor. Well, anyways, so I didn't film, I tape recorded it. So anyways, I'm knowing now that I'm not going to get no justice here, so I better get a lawyer. So I asked the judge if he'd appoint that lawyer that he had previously, David DeSantis had previously appointed him. I'll get into that clown later too. And the first attorney, this would have been the first attorney, he knew this case was a nightmare, and he withdrew. After the court appointed him, he withdrew. I never even spoke to the guy. Now, the second attorney they gave me was an ex-prosecutor. This clown set me up to be served the eviction notice from Castleton's attorneys. Only he knew that I was going to be in court this one day. Only he knew it. Nobody else in court, none of the other attorneys, the district attorney, nobody knew I was going to be there. But he knew it. And what happens, I go there to the hearing, and this clown attorney serves me the eviction notice. And then after that, of course, I discovered this guy had been a prosecutor, so I demanded he withdraw, and he did, because he knew I had him. That's why he withdrew. Now the next attorney they gave me was an ex-sexual predator, and this guy was lazy. After about 9 months or so, I finally contacted him and says, hey, what's going on? Fast and speedy. I made a video showing the ramp, and there's a video, it was standing against a tree. I called the judge a punk, and he withdrew after this. But that moron says the beast is quiet, so don't awaken the beast. Well, the fast and speedy provision had already been violated by the state. It was obvious the state of New York was delaying the matter, hoping that either Cass Lane dies, or I die, or they find me mentally incapacitated. Anyway, this judge withdrew. This lawyer withdrew. And then I get a call from this clown named David DeSantis. Now, he chastises me and says that this would be the last attorney my office appoints to you. Or that you're, And then later on in the conversation, he claims the clerk of the United City Court appoints attorneys to indigent criminal defendants. And that's a total lie. But I contacted the clerk of the court for verification. And this Carla Fitzgerald, who's the clerk, tells me that she appoints attorneys, which is a bold-faced lie. The court judge allows the appointment of an attorney. He has to grant it, yeah. But he doesn't do the appointing. David DeSantis' office appoints the individual attorneys. These clowns are just bold-faced liars, and they get away with it because taxpayer dollars, there's nobody to account for. And these people just can't stop lying. DeSantis tells me this will be the last attorney that is appointed. And when I call him on his lie, he blocks my emails. When I send him the email, send him the law that says that his office appoints attorneys to indigent defendants, criminal defendants. So anyways, I provide all the evidence to me, to this Brandon Rigby. Now, he appoints this guy named Brandon Rigby. I provided all the evidence one would need to take this right through the trial. I had affidavits. I had telephone numbers, addresses of 6 witnesses. I had the videos online with all the emails and stuff that this clown sent. I had a plethora. I presented a pack of prima facie evidence that I was not guilty of this crime. And Rigby thanks me and tells me, oh, my investigator will investigate all that. Yeah, he's on top of that. So Rigby then sends me an email to chat with him. I explained, I do not want to chat with you. And that all future correspondence will be through emails. Now, within his email, he says the offer from the state is a good one, and I should consider it. The judge even made that statement in open court. Man, this is a good plea agreement. Yeah, for a guilty guy. If it's so good, I told him, Judge, why don't you take it? To me, the offer showed the state didn't have a case, and I'm innocent. The state offered to drop the charges if I wouldn't harass Cass Lane anymore and stay away from him. Now, it should be noted that Cass Lane was a public pretender years ago. He worked for the public defender's office there in Casanova or Canastola or someplace. Now, I knew right there and then there was a problem. There was going to be a plan to get me to cop to a plea. There were many violations of my constitutional rights. It was almost laughable if it hadn't been a criminal in nature, the case. These clowns, and that's exactly what they are. They're clowns posed as bureaucrats. Now, I'm beginning to see the matter in a different light. Cass Lane set me up with the router issue and with the plywood ramp blocking the entrance exit to my apartment. He knew I would remove the booby trap and even installed a camera to get the video of me removing the obstacle. A ramp he never used, and after I removed it in April, it remained leaning against the tree for months until it disappeared permanently. Now, when the cops came to arrest me on May 10th, there were 3, by the way, because I berated Officer Ethan C. Coss while taking me to jail for removing the ramp and sending Cass Lane 3 emails depicting him harassing me. The clown judge, Daniel Vinyl, issued an arrest warrant. But you know what? The cops passed right by that ramp, still leaning against the tree. That's how stupid these cops were. And now, of course, I'm living in my car and at hotels until my SS check is used up. I live in hotels until it's used up, and then I had to go, stay in my car at truck stops and what have you. So Rigby and I exchange a barrage of emails back and forth. Finally, he threatens me that he will ask for a mental examination if I persist to refuse to cop to a plea or meet with him in person, and if I continue to post his stupid emails on YouTube. Okay? So I'm on to this puppet for David DeSantis, who makes $205,000 a year appointing other attorneys to represent criminal indigent defendants. Now, on March 1st, 2023, Rigby asked the court, there's a hearing, Rigby asked the court to order the mental examination. The court ignores Rigby. And while the judge tries to persuade me to take the mental examination, to accept the mental examination, he does not issue a verbal order. I start needling Rigby that the judge was protecting him by not issuing the order because the judge himself asked me if I wanted to represent myself. Now, if the court thought that I was incapacitated, mentally incapacitated, why would they ask me to represent myself? Now, if Rigby or the judge actually thought I was mentally incapacitated to assist in my own defense, why would they tell me I can represent myself? You see, this is a conspiracy. They want to get out of this. This is a headache for them, this case. They know I'm innocent. But you see, they need to get my signature on that dotted line under plea agreement. Oh, yeah, we're not going to do anything. It's not even going to be listed as a crime, they tell me. That's how moronic these morons are. It is a crime. You're accusing me of a crime. You're accusing me of being someplace I shouldn't be, and I was not. The judge knows he cannot issue such an order, since he saw no signs of my being disrupted or displaying any bizarre behavior. In court, I was cordial, nice. I answered his questions. Now, over the next couple of weeks, I deride Rigby about this. I tease him about this. On the court ignoring his request by email and on YouTube. I posted a video. On April 12, 2023, we appear in court, and the judge says that on the next court date, he's going to entertain a motion to proceed on my own behalf. So the judge had not issued any order for the examination that these people are claiming happened on March 1st. The judge doesn't say it. He's going to issue an order for me to, he's going to entertain a motion on my behalf to represent myself. So I'm laughing under my breath. And once again, Rigby asked the court to issue a mental examination order, and the judge ignores him again. Then, after my videos and my teasing Rigby, he says, on April 25th, Rigby got Carla Fitzgerald, the liar, who said that she appoints attorneys to criminal cases, to forge the judge's signature to an order for the mental examination. Now, she admits it to me. On August 23rd, this bimbo admitted to me that she stamped, that Rigby called her, told her what to put in the order, and then she stamped the judge's signature to it. But the judge never ordered it. I was there on March 1st, and the judge never ordered it. So now on the 25th, I got an email from Madison County Mental Health Department, this Elizabeth Spalding chick, demanding that I attend an examination that was scheduled for 3 days later, on April 28th, 2023. So 3 days, they wanted me to appear. Now, there were many discrepancies. The order said that because I was using the YouTube channel to post Rigby's emails, I was mentally incapacitated, or they thought I was mentally, could be. A court cannot use one's exercising their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or freedom of religion and freedom of the press to order a mental examination because somebody's exercising that right. Now, Rigby even presented that my channel on YouTube should be used in mental examination. Now, my channel is religious freedom, freedom of the press, and freedom of speech on YouTube. You're right here, right now. What is this? This is a way for us to express our freedoms. A judge will not make suggestions in an order of the court, and this order is just full of suggestions. It has suggested this, that his email or his YouTube account be examined for this. And then it's requested that the attorney, Rigby himself, attend the examination. Now, Rigby would send me emails with lies, misdirections of law. For instance, Rigby tells me emails are not admissible in court, even though the emails I wanted admitted were done in the course of business of the alleged victim and his attorneys. they're admissible under the office document rule. And then Rigby tells me that an ex parte ruling, which means a one-sided, which means the prosecutor was there, but my attorney or me weren't there, so we didn't know what was going on. We're in front of the court, and they were requesting an ex parte order from the court, like they did for the order of protection. There was no reason for the order of protection, none. So I tell Rigby, after he's, doesn't know what an ex parte hearing, the difference that one needs the other. In other words, you can't have Rigby said you could have an ex parte ruling without an ex parte hearing. I laughed. You can't have an ex parte ruling without an ex parte hearing. It's just not possible. So then I tell Rigby, oh, what a tangled web we weave. Once we practice to deceive, which is an old adage. And he writes back, oh, so you know Shakespeare. I laughed at his. I wish I would have been there in person. It came from the play entitled Marmion by Sir Walter Scott, not Shakespeare. That's how stupid this idiot is. Now, Rigby tells me that a victim of a crime could not be deposed in criminal matters. And that was wrong. If the victim cannot be present for any of the number of reasons, least of all if they were about to or could die, then to interview the victim before trial would be appropriate. I think that Castellane, being in his 90s, would suffice such a request. And then when I corrected Rigby, he said that isn't done in courts, in criminal courts. And then when I corrected him, he said, yes, but we don't want to do that for some stupid reason that we could not cross him later. We don't need to cross him later. I had the questions that would have proved that he's a liar. Now, you would be cross-examining him in the video, you smuck. That's what I tell him. Geez, and Madison County Judge O'Sullivan now, this is the judge now before, tells me Rigby is a good lawyer. Yeah, good for nothing, the lying punk. Now, after reading the email from Elizabeth Spaulding, I replied with the request to prove an order was sent. Tell me the date it was sent and how or who you received it through or from. She sends me a copy of the order. On the order face, it reads that it was issued on March 1st. Now remember, here we were in April 14th. Nothing is said about this examination. Not a word. And it was supposed to be in his court. The report was supposed to be done, if he had signed the order, the judge that signed the order, was supposed to be done on April 12th. Now the crazy part of the order, they had to complete their report and submit a copy of it to the court by April 12th. I got the order on April 25th from this bimbo, Elizabeth Spaulding. Now, when she received the order and who provided the order, she clammed up. I want to thank you for watching this first part. Stay tuned for part 2 because there's a lot more to this. I didn't want to make it too long, but I thank you for actually, attending this little video I have, because it's important that we recap this before I go into the final stages of my legal processes here that are still pending, one in federal court and one in Madison County State Court. So thanks for watching the video, and you know what? You have a good day.